ready to go. This is the Morning Mojo with Jeet
on Radio 44.
Right, a very good morning to you. Time coming to 5 minutes past 8 a.m. And like I'd mentioned before, we do have someone very special in the studio with us, Mr. Sharad Rao, EBS, Barrister of Lincoln's Inn London, Advocate of the High Court of Kenya, former Director of Public Prosecutions and former Chairman of Judges and Magistrates Vetting Board of Kenya. Today we're going to be talking about his autobiography titled From Jomo to Uhuru, Rao's 9 Lives. We're going to go into some music, and right after that we're going to be talking about a man who shaped this nation into what she is. And we do have Mr. Sharad Rao in the studio with us right here at the Radio 44 studios. So good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. If you could start by briefly telling us more about yourself and how you got involved in the legislation of this country.
Well, I was born in Kenya. I was born in Nairobi way back on the 13th of October, 1935. The 12th of October was a full moon night. We Indians call it the Sharad Purnima.
Okay.
And as I was born, just following that, the next morning on the 13th of October, I was named Sharad.
Okay.
That's where the name comes from.
Right.
But I lived all my life, most of my life, until I went to England to study in Nairobi. Mm-hmm. We were most of the Indians at that time lived either in Nagara or in Parklands, up to the First Avenue Parklands, and some lived in Pangani,
yes,
or the side road. So we lived in Nagara, in a community which was largely Indian, and my interaction right up to the time that I went to school was among Indians. So I'm often asked about discrimination in Kenya.
Yes.
And I said, as far as I'm concerned, we lived in our own quarters in different compartments. The Indians lived among themselves, the European among themselves. And in those days, the Africans didn't matter. So they were not allocated any particular area to live in. So I lived among Indians, and we sort of never faced discrimination as such, because there was discrimination. There was discrimination, large-scale discrimination in all schools were discriminated against. Schools, colleges, universities, clubs, hospitals. There was segregation all through.
Right.
So where Europeans did not allow us even into hotels, restaurants, clubs. So that is how the life was. But as I said, during that young period, we just lived among ourselves, and we never felt the impact of that kind of discrimination.
Right.
It was only after I'd gone to England, came back as a barrister, that I began to realize what discrimination was. And I faced discrimination right at the start, in the sense that when I came here in 1959, and we had to do 1 year of pupillage.
Okay.
All the large firms were European at the time, and it was their stated policy not to accept any Indian, or for that matter any African, even as a pupil.
Okay.
So I had difficulties. I applied to almost all of them, and all of them, of course, refused on the basis that they would not allow an Indian even as a pupil. So I thought that I would try my luck with the Attorney General's office, the State Law Office, which used to be called the Crown Law Office at the time. So I applied for a position there, and I was invited for an interview with the Attorney General. So I had a small little Fiat 1100 at the time, and I went to what we call the Sharia House. I saw a parking there, and I parked my car there. And as there was still time for the appointment, I walked across to a coffee house. I had coffee there, and I came back, only to find that my car was now surrounded by police.
Okay.
And there were a lot of people standing behind it. So when I came and I said, "What is the problem?" And they said, "Why have you parked there?" So I said there was an empty space, and I parked there. What's the problem? No, that space is reserved for the Attorney General.
Okay.
So I said, well, I didn't notice it, and that's why I parked there. I just said that when a European came out from the building.
Right.
Confronted me. And his first thing was, he says, how dare you park in my parking area? So I said, I saw parking. There was no clear marking on it that it was reserved for anyone. And that's why I parked there. So he said, that place is reserved for the Attorney General. And his tone was very he was screaming almost as to why I asked for him. So I couldn't take it, and I turned around and I said, but who are you anyway to speak to me like that? And he said, I am Griffith Jones, the Attorney General. And that's the man that I had an appointment with.
Oh my God. Wow. That's the best beginning for a job interview.
So I said, I'm sorry. So anyway, I got into my car and I left, and I, of course, didn't turn up for the interview.
Right.
So that was my first encounter with that office.
Right.
Now, as I said, it was difficult to get pupillage at any of these firms, which were large. Most of the firms were European, and they would not take an Asian, even as a pupil. But there was one Irish lawyer who was the Crown Counsel, and he had just retired as Crown Counsel and had gone into private practice. And he had then acquired, as a client, the Cooper Motor Corporation, and he had to do the debt collection for them. So he took me on, and he said, I will put you on debt collection for Cooper Motors Corporation. But you have to share your offices with my clerk, an Indian clerk.
Right.
So I and an Indian clerk called Mr. Khan, the two of us shared one office. But then O'Byrne had criminal practice, and I accompanied him to most of the time when he went to defend cases. He was one of the leading criminal lawyers at the time, because he was Crown Counsel, come into private practice, and he was one of the leading criminal lawyers at the time. That's how I sort of acquired interest in criminal law.
Excellent.
And that's what led me eventually to become a criminal lawyer. Excellent.
We're going to be continuing the conversation right after this. And we do have Mr. Rao in the studio with us. Now, we currently have this book right here in the studio. Your book, your autobiography. And, it's got fascinating accounts of, your interactions with Kenya's first three presidents. Right, we've got Jomo Kenyatta himself, Daniel Arap Moi, Mwai Kibaki. Now, can you share, at least one of your most memorable incidents you witnessed involving President Kenyatta?
I think with President Kenyatta, I think the most important meeting that I had with him was in connection with a demonstration by the students from the University of Nairobi, who went out on a rampage because they had been denied the chapati.
Okay.
And it was called the Chapati Riot. So at the time, about 72 of them had been arrested and taken to community prison. So Jonjo came to me. Jonjo was the Attorney General at the time. He came to me one morning and said that the president wants you to put them in prison. And I said, but AG, that's not possible because we don't have evidence against them. Police picked up so many of them, but we didn't have cameras in those days and things to record who did what.
Right.
So I said, if they plead not guilty, we would not be able to prove any case against them. So I said, well, you have to tell that to the president. So I was summoned to the president's office. As I walked in, the president looked at me and he says, what is this I hear? That you are defying my order. So I said, Your Excellency, can I say something? He says, what is there to say? I want those people in. You understand? So I said, I do understand, President, but please listen to me. I said, if these students go and plead not guilty, we cannot prove a case against them. And he looked at me with great anger. I said, look, as far as I'm concerned, I want all of them in. So I said, Your Excellency, can I suggest something? So he says, what do you want to suggest? So I said, as you want me to take them to court, I will take them to court. Can I suggest that when I do take them to court, you send an order stopping me from prosecuting them? And that, Kenyatta's eyes around when he brightened up. He saw the political opportunity in it. And he said, fine, let's do that. So he said, 12 o'clock. You understand? 12 o'clock? I want them to be walking out of committee prison. I will have gone on the air and said that I have ordered their release. You understand? So it was 20 minutes to 12. So I said, Your Excellency, it's 20 minutes to 12. He said, look, I have agreed to everything that you told me. Now you will do exactly what I'm telling you. At 12 o'clock, I want them to be walking out of committee prison. So the police commissioner was there. He said, sir, don't worry, we'll manage. So I got into his car. We went to the court number 1. Interrupted the court. I said to the magistrate, it was Sachdeva, who was the chief magistrate at the time. And I said, I want to see you very urgently. So I went in and told them, can you get those files before you? Because we want to be, I will stand up and I will tell you what we're going to be doing. So the files were brought and I stood up. And as I stood up, someone walked in, as it was planned, handed me a piece of paper. I looked at it and I said, Your Honor, I am entering a nolle prosequi, which means that I'm withdrawing the charges against all those accused. And the magistrate looked a bit puzzled and he said, are you sure? I said, absolutely sure. So he said, you want me to release them? I said, yes. So they were released. Just about 5 minutes before 12, they started walking out of
so you kept your word.
Of committee prison.
Lovely.
So that day, Jomo Kenyatta was not very popular with students, particularly the students at the university. But having done that, when he went out from State House in his open car, past the students' quarters, which was just on the way, and he was standing in an open car, waving his flying whisk. All the students had come out and were waving at him and thanking him for what he had done. So it was a great moment for him.
Now considering you have such a long and distinguished career in such an important role, or various roles rather, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced and how did you get through them?
I think the biggest challenge that I faced was when I was appointed DPP. I joined those chambers in 1970 as assistant DPP. That post was created for me. Because at that time, all the DPPs were European. And Jomo Kenyatta decided that it was time to Africanize. And he had one person in mind called James Karugu, who was a senior state counsel in the state law office. But he didn't have enough experience. So I was then asked, because I was one of the leading criminal lawyers at the time, and I was asked whether I could join the chambers to sort of make up for the lack of experience on James Karugu's part. So a post was created for me of assistant DPP.
Right.
And that's how I joined the chambers in July 1970 as assistant DPP. And that was meant to be temporary, but eventually they asked me to go on permanent terms. And in 1982, when President Arap Mwai was president, and Karugu became the Attorney General when Charles Jones resigned, and I was appointed the DPP.
Okay.
The biggest challenge that I had as DPP was within my own office. We had an accounting officer, a European. And various Europeans at the time were prepared to accept the authority of the Africans.
Okay.
To accept any kind of authority to be exercised by an Indian was not palatable. So our accounting officer was European. He was the Registrar General for Kenya. And he resented my appointment as assistant DPP. And eventually also when I became the DPP. So a lot of problems were created for me. It's a period that was one of the most difficult periods in my life.
How did you handle it?
Well, I had, fortunately, the support of the Office of the President.
Right.
So when I was, for instance, appointed assistant DPP, Coward said to me that you will be treading on the toes of so many counsel who are already there. Quite a few of them are Indian. They're not going to take it very kindly, you coming over them.
Right.
So I said, look, I haven't asked for the appointment. I have been invited. I've been asked by the Attorney General to join the chambers, and that's why the post has been created for me. So it's unfortunate. If they don't like it, they don't like it. But I have to.
You have to complete the job.
I have to complete my job. So I became the assistant DPP, and when I became DPP, he was even more resentful.
Okay.
Because when I became DPP, the first thing I asked him was for the office, because I was in an office,
right,
a smaller office.
Right.
So he tells me that office has already been allocated. He had allocated to a New Zealander who was a draftsman. So that office is not available. And so I said, look, that's the DPP's office. So he said, no, we thought you were quite comfortable where you are. So until the draftsman leaves, I'm afraid you have to stay in that office, which I did. Then I said, what about my car? They said, what car? I said, as DPP, I'm entitled to a car. He said, no, that was personal to Mr. Uhuru.
Okay.
So I said, look, when I was appointed DPP, I accepted the position on the basis that all the privileges, all the entitlements will go with it.
Right.
And one of them is that I will be given a car and a driver. So he said it was personal to Mr. Uhuru. So I rang up the president's office, and the president's office rang him up and said, give him a car.
Good.
So I was given a car, an old Volvo, about to break down.
Okay.
So I said, Mr. Kawat, I will not accept this car. He said, there's no budgetary provision for any other car. I said, this I will not accept. So I rang again the office of the president. And Kireni, who was Mr. Kireni, he was the head of civil service. He said, Sharad, just go to Amazon Motors, just buy yourself a car. So I went there and I bought a new Volvo, and which was now to be delivered at the office, which was, and within a few days it was delivered. And the keys were handed to him, to Mr. Kawat. And Kawat said to me, I'm sorry, but I have mislaid the keys, I can't find them. So 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, I had no access to that car. So one day I rang him up and I said, I've asked Amazon Motors to come and break it open and fit a new lock. So he said, but how would we explain it to the Auditor General? I said, well, we can't find the key. The car is there, so there's no other alternative. 10 minutes later, he rings me up. He said, I found the keys. Oh, I said, that's very nice. I said, where were they?
Very convenient.
He said, oh, they were in my drawer.
My God.
So I said, David, I knew all along they were in your drawer. But anyway, that's history.
So these were the petty little games that were being played.
The petty little games. So I said, now the car is there. What about the driver? So he sends me an old driver with a broken teeth, So I said, I am entitled to a police driver. I am not accepting this driver. He said, no, but that was personal to Mr. Uhuru. So again, I had to refer to the president's office. And he was ordered now to allocate a police driver for me. So these are the kind of incidents.
That you actually
so as I said, I was denied that office. And then eventually, when he was directed by the office of the president to get that office for me, I was given the office. And that office was fitted with a wall-to-wall carpet. He removed the carpet, saying that was personal to the DPP.
My God.
Before me. So those are the kind of problems that I had. Yes.
Right. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back right after this. Now, reflecting on your time as, Director of Public Prosecutions, what were some of the key reforms you believe are necessary for improving Kenya's judicial system today?
Well, not so much in my time as the DPP. But after that, if you remember, under the new constitution, they set up the Judicial Service Commission.
Right.
The vetting of judges and magistrates under that.
Yes.
Ordinarily, you cannot vet judges unless they themselves volunteer to do so. But under our 2010 constitution, it was specifically provided that all the judges and magistrates who were in office at the time the constitution came into effect would have to be vetted for their suitability to continue. Unfortunately, I was appointed chairman of that body.
Yes.
How that happened, very quickly to tell you, I went to the Mathaiga Golf Club and I found President Kibaki there. And he asked me over and said, come and have a drink. And he said, I want to make you an offer. Will you accept? So I said, President, you make me an offer. Of course I need to I will accept. What is the offer? He said, I want to appoint you. I want to nominate you as chairman of the Judges and Magistrates Vetting Board, which we are setting up. So I said, oh, well, that's a great honor. Of course I will accept. But President, you realize that you have to consult under the Constitution. You have to consult do it in consultation with the Prime Minister, which was Mr. Odinga at the time.
Yes.
So I said, yes, of course I'm aware of that. But consultation doesn't mean that he has to agree to my nomination. I will talk to him. And now that you've agreed, whether he says yes or no, I'm going to go ahead with your appointment. Fortunately for me, Odinga did endorse my appointment as well. And I became chairman of that body. So that was the most important process as far as the judicial system is concerned. We set from 2011 to 2016.
Right.
And we had distinguished judges on the panel. We had Justice Alby Sachs, who is one of the most known and most judicial authority internationally. So he was one of them, and we had the Chief Justice of Ghana also on our panel. And in the 5 years that we did that vetting process, I think the system changed a lot. Because first of all, we weeded out all those who had allegations of corruption,
right,
or allegations of inefficiency, or allegations of not delivering judgments, etc. So all those were weeded out. And the other thing that we actually insisted on was that when lawyers and witnesses appear in court, they should be dealt with politely. And that has become quite a reformed process as far as today's judicial system is concerned.
Excellent.
The judges are very polite to witnesses who appear, to lawyers who appear. So it wasn't the kind of treatment that they used to receive before that. So that's been a great one.
Excellent.
And of course, to the extent that we could, because whereas this body was set up in order to deal with corruption, very few people came forward for as far as corruption was concerned. So whether they were afraid of giving evidence of how they were involved or whatever, but most of the cases were dealt with on other grounds such as a magistrate's efficiency, whether they delivered judgments in time, whether they were temperamentally suited to the job, etc. But I think that went through a good legal process. And I think the judiciary has improved a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how, your experiences as a lawyer, as a public servant, how do these, shape your views on justice and accountability today in Kenya?
You see, in the time, actually, I must admit, even when I was the DPP and I was in that office, the judiciary was not entirely independent. It wasn't. It was subject very much to the directions of the state. Okay. And also the judges and magistrates fear if they didn't do something which was approved by the executive, then there would be problems for continuing or problems in promotion, etc.
Right.
So quite often they sought directions as to how they should rule in a particular case, which was unfortunate. And that went through not only among magistrates and judges, but in even the Chief Justice, who initially used to consult us as to the kind of what the judiciary, what the executive expected them to do in a particular case, particularly if it's a political case. But a time came when the Chief Justice had a direct line with State House and would directly ring the President and ask him what he should be doing. So the judiciary was most non-independent at the time, which is not so now.
It's changed.
It has changed, yeah. And particularly the appointment of young judges.
Yes.
Very competent, very independent, and not those who are subject to directions from anyone.
From a state.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that is definitely progress. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back after this. And we do have Mr. Sharad Rao right here in the studio with us. Now, taking a look at your book, sir, From Jomo to Uhuru, Rao's 9 Lives. Of course, it's there's so much in there, but Can I hear it from you? Well, what do you think what is your favorite chapter in the whole book?
I think what would appeal very much to the public is to know about the intrigues against Jomo, which is chapter 17 of the book. Because Jomo, as you know, he wielded a lot of power. He was responsible for making arap Mwai as the president.
Yes.
Much against opposition from the Kikuyus, who expected a Kikuyu to be appointed. But at Jomo's insistence to stick to the constitution and the vice president should take over, Daniel Arap Moi became the president. But interestingly, what happened was that people around the president didn't like the authority that Jomo was commanding. And quite often that decisions they had taken were overruled by the president at the insistence of Jomo. So there was quite a lot of people now working against Jomo. And interestingly, I don't think people know it, but at that time, the Vice President of America, United States, George Bush, came here. And George Bush and an Indian tantric astrologer called Chandraswami. Those were the two who played a vital role in actually working against Jomo.
Okay.
What had happened was that when Vice President Bush came here, and he told President Arap Moi, why don't you appoint Jomo as the vice president in place of Kibaki? Now that people who went to the president and said, you know what they're up to, they want him to become the vice president and they will take directions from him. In time, they will oust you and make Jomo the president.
Right.
So that was fed into him. The other man who was instrumental now in the fall of Jomo was this man called Chandraswami.
Okay.
This Chandraswami used to go to various political leaders, including Margaret Thatcher and people like that. And when he came here, he sought an appointment to see the president. And he went to see the president. When the president walked into that office, he said, stop. So the president, stopped and he said, look into your coat pocket. There's a wallet. So yes, and in the wallet there are notes of these denominations. And he told him the denominations of those notes. So of course, the president was very impressed. And this became now, he started taking advice from him, getting prophecies from him.
Hook and bait.
And during that process, this Swami told the president, you have enemies in your cabinet. And one of them is Jomo. His name starting with an N, married to a European, and that sort of pointed now to Jomo. Then he sent a message to me through a close friend, saying that he had now done this, talked against Jomo to the president. But if Jomo agreed to give him a large amount of money, he could undo the damage. So I felt obliged that I had to go and tell Jomo that this is what he's asking. Yeah. And Jomo's simple answer was, ask him to go to hell. All right. But that put him out of favor as far as the president was concerned.
Okay.
And eventually, as you know, an inquiry was set up against him. And that was the time when I was the GPP.
Right.
Now, I was perceived to be very close to Jomo.
Right.
So one of the things that didn't suit the president was to have me as DPP at a time when he was setting
against Jomo. Okay, and that's chapter 17.
That is chapter 17.
Very interesting. Mr. Sharad Rao, thank you so much for joining us right here on Radio 44, of course. And where is your book available?
I wrote the book, but it has been published by a local publisher, and he's the man responsible for selling it and whatever profit he makes out of it.
Right.
My job was only to write and hand it over to him.
All right.
So I was quite happy that I got the opportunity to write.
It's phenomenal. Yeah. 9 lives.
But obviously it will be available at various bookshops. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.